figure today's video is going to be a little shorter than is usual for this channel, but I have done so much research in the last like 2 months that I need to not do that for a short period of time because I am such a sleepy little guy. So we're going to talk about accessible spaces today and how to create accessible spaces because I've talked specifically about accessible staging for theater before. I also have a whole playlist on accessible education and like creating accessible classrooms because that was my thesis. I'll link that up here. But for some reason I've never opened up that wider topic beyond that, other than like things that I throw into different videos. I've never made a specific dedicated video to accessible spaces before, and I don't know why, so we're gonna do it. Also for friends who need it, I am a white person in their early 20s with light brown shoulder length curly hair. I am wearing a white dress that has lemons on it, and I am sitting in front of a plain wall that has green leaves on it. Awesome. Okay, so 2 things to say before we dive into this that are important to keep in mind. The first is that this is going to be a non-exhaustive list. Obviously, I'm going to forget stuff. I don't know everything about every single accessibility option that exists. This is simply a resource to get you started with the basics, and there's so much beyond this. Also, so much of accessibility is like individual things that individual people have created for themselves. So there is no human on the planet who knows all accessibility stuff all at once. So if you have something that I did not mention, please put it in the comments and make this a place for resources. We love creating spaces like that on the internet. And the second thing is that access is not a one-size-fits-all situation. A lot of my work focuses on integrative accessibility, like what are simple things that can be done to make life easier for everybody regardless of disability status. But there is no such thing as 100% accessibility because access needs clash literally all the time. For example, a deaf person might use flashing lights to indicate that the doorbell has been rung, but those flashing lights might be a migraine trigger for somebody else. Or somebody might need bright lighting to be able to see because they're low vision, but another person may need dimmer lighting due to their disability. Or the one that I come up against a lot is that I speak really fast when I speak organically because I have a speech disorder, and if I try to slow my speech down, I lose my ability to think, and speech production itself becomes very difficult. But for some other listeners, my speed of speech is very difficult for their auditory processing, and it's exhausting to try to focus on what I have to say. While other people, because of their auditory processing, find it easier to listen to what I have to say, and that my speed of speech better fits their access needs. The reality of accessibility is that it is messy, and it is complicated, and all we can do is do our best and be willing to listen, have multiple options available, and be flexible and willing to change things last minute. It's just kind of part of the fun. When we all come together as a disability community, we are very good at embracing the mess and giggling about things and being like, LOL, this didn't work. And I found that places that are like not familiar with the culture of the disability community and want to try to become accessible, they feel like the mess of it means they failed, and so then they're like, oh, it went badly, so it's not worth trying again. When embracing the mess is an important part of accessibility. So embrace the organized chaos, just be organized with it, and know that being imperfect is perfect because full access does not exist, will never exist. And also, obviously, as I said earlier, so much of accessibility is very individual to each and every person, and you just can't plan for all of it. It's impossible. And also, if one disabled person comes into your space and tells you it's accessible, it does not mean that it is accessible. It means that it was accessible to that one specific disabled person. There are obviously agencies and whatnot that are full of professionals who can help advise on more widespread accessibility, but the whole, well, the one wheelchair user comes in here sometimes and he said it was fine, so we did it, we don't need to change, thing is not a thing, and please don't ask random disabled people to let you know if your space is accessible because no. And also, like, each disabled person has a somewhat bias toward their own lived experience. For example, my work focuses on mental disability, and I also know what it's like to navigate spaces with a service dog, so my access comments are always going to lean more toward that perspective. Also, one more thing, in my experience, planning accessible events or creating accessible spaces is just as expensive and time-consuming and amount of work as planning inaccessible events. It usually just takes a bit more thought because it's not how events are typically organized, but that usually means that your events end up more organized, planned out, and better run at the end of the day anyway, so it is overall worth it even if it feels atypically like difficult at the beginning. At the end of the day, it's not. Just trust me on that. But let's talk about access. So the first and most obvious thing is ADA compliance. You're required to have it by law. Doesn't mean that happens a lot of the time, but you at least need to try. This means that your space needs to be wheelchair navigable. It means that it has to have an elevator if there are multiple levels, has to have an accessible restroom, have fire alarms that flash when they go off, have automatic open doors, all of that good stuff. There's like some grandfathering and retrofitting, so it's complicated, but generally, try to have ADA compliance. Also, if you are like, oh, we have stairs, we'll just throw a piece of plywood on top of it to make it a wheelchair ramp. Wheelchair ramps have a specific angle they need to be at to keep the wheelchair user safe. and that is a thing, so just be aware of that. Wheelchair accessibility also includes having things at wheelchair height, which also increases accessibility for short-statured folks as well, so that's really great. Having wheelchair designated seats with companion seats next to them, and your wheelchair spaces should be as good quality as the rest of the seating. A lot of Broadway theaters have a solid portion of their wheelchair seats be partial view seats, which is fundamentally rude. In general, there should be guaranteed spots for various disabilities, including spots near the ASL interpreter, wheelchair and companion seats, and seats for low vision and hard of hearing people who need to be closer to whatever the event is in order to see or hear. I will also mention that the Americans with Disabilities Act is a public document because it is a federal law, and you can read it, and it is no more legalese complicated than reading your average high school biology textbook. It's really not that complicated, so take the time to sit down and read it. I highly recommend it. You can also read all the OSHA guidelines. I've done that. But the ADA is going to be more helpful, so maybe focus on that. But I recommend sitting down and reading the ADA if you ever have time, disabled or not. It's worth like 20-30 minutes of your time to just sit down and know what the law is. It's really helpful. In addition to ADA compliance, if your event is an event where chairs are being set up, make sure that when you're setting up the chairs, it's still wheelchair navigable and there is proper space in the aisles for them to be able to move places. Also, keep the ground surface in mind. It's very difficult to wheel over dirt or grass. Other seating accessibility includes having wider seats for all kinds of bodies, having larger footroom and space in front of the seat. I don't know if you've ever had to squish into a teeny tiny seat in a teeny tiny squish theater with a service dog underneath you, but it is very squishy. I do need to say, I didn't have a trainee at the time that I was doing this. I don't have trainees anymore, but the legroom in the mezzanine of the Minskoff where the Lion King is stunning. It's gorgeous. You could fit a whole like golden retriever up there, like a giant one, and it would be happy as can be, and you would still be able to have your feet like not touching your dog. It's gorgeous. There should also be lots of places to sit around. The amount of giant museums I have been to that have 0 benches is astounding to me. Benches are great. Chairs are great. Let people sit places. Another important access thing is allowing people to bring their own food and water. A lot of venues don't allow food and drinks to begin with, which is completely understandable. There's a lot of reasons as to why that is the case, but some people for safety do need to have food on their bodies at all times, like people with serious food allergies or food sensitivities like myself, people with metabolic and dysautonomic disorders like diabetes or POTS. We need to carefully manage our food and our water intake, and we may not be able to safely buy something at a venue because we need to control our ingredients. I am notorious for going out to restaurants to eat with friends and then just sitting there and watching them eat and then like pulling a bag of goldfish out of my bag and eating them as we walk to the next place that we're going to afterwards. And it's actually not as weird and uncomfortable to just not eat at a restaurant than you think it's gonna be. Like, my anxiety was worried about that for a really long time and I would keep getting sick because I was just like scared. Don't do that to yourself. It's okay to go to a restaurant with friends or go to a bar with friends and just not eat or drink anything, and nobody really cares. Nobody pays attention to it except you. If a venue does supply food and drink, having ingredients lists available is really helpful. I will also add that if you're going to like bake a pie for your next door neighbor, also include what the ingredients are on it, because like in the neighborhood where I grew up, everybody would, you know, make baked goods around Christmas time and deliver them to different houses, and I can't eat any of them because none of them are labeled and I don't know what any of them are, and I can't just like shove something in my face and decide what it is when I'm eating it because I could get sick. And that's really sad because I want to partake. And so in general, ingredient lists are very helpful. It's also important to have allergen-friendly options, and allergen-friendly options can include FODMAP-friendly options. If you take garlic and onions and lactose out of things, a large percentage of the population is going to be very grateful for you. Also, having single-served packaged food is really helpful. Like in rehearsal spaces where food is offered, sometimes it'll be in like a communal container that you can pour things out of, and sometimes it'll be like those individual prepackaged bags of snacks. And individual bags mean that I can actually eat, which is wonderful because there's no like cross-contamination and I don't need to worry about ingredients and I know what is in the thing that I am consuming. Again, they're not as eco-friendly, but you know, if you're looking for really allergen-free foods, completely allergen-free popcorn is really easy to find. So if you're trying to think of a good option of a food to serve, a snack kind of thing, highly recommend popcorn. There's so many different options. And there's also allergen-friendly ones that are prepackaged, so those are really helpful if you need one. And also let us know in advance what kind of food is going to be available and what the ingredients are beforehand, because like I've learned at this point, food will be provided does not mean that safe food is going to be provided. I always pack my own food just in case, But sometimes I don't actually need to do that, and I don't need to like stress about like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get a meal in? How am I going to make sure that I feel okay for the entirety of this event? Because I'm actually able to eat what's offered, and I don't know that until I know what the specific menu is going to be. Knowing the food offered in advance also sometimes decides whether it's worth it for me to go and attend an event or not, because it's one thing to not eat anything when I'm hanging out with my friends, and another thing to go to like a fancy dinner that the whole point of it is to be a fancy dinner and then be the only one who's not eating anything. I really just like, I can't do it. It's not gonna happen. So I will usually ditch those kinds of events, and I would like to be involved in those kinds of events, but I can't. Also, if you do need some pro tips on how to sneak food into somewhere, my pro tip is that I always wear my Bose headphones wherever I go. I don't know where they are. But the headphone case that the Bose headphones come in looks like this. It's a hard shell headphone case, and I fill it with snacks. And then if I go through security, they just assume that it's like an empty case where I'm gonna put my headphones in when I get into the venue, when actually it's full of small bags of goldfish, and it's fantastic. Another option is to hide it in a small bag underneath a bunch of pads and tampons, but that one is a little bit more difficult to pull off. Highly recommend the headphone situation. Other important things are having live captions and ASL interpreters. Also, you should have both, not one or the other, since many non-signers need and use captions. Assistive listening options and T-coil capability, if possible, are really great as well. Having audio description is also important, which includes like video description, kind of like what I did at the beginning of this video. You should also do that in person. Like, you know, if you're at a panel, you can say name, pronouns, and a visual description of what you look like, for example. Have image descriptions and alt text in your emails and on your websites, and just otherwise generally describe what images are being shown. And if anything is important in an image, make sure it is described, because people might miss out on it if they cannot see the image. Having large print options available, as well as braille options and tactical guides, are really great. Tactical guides give you the ability to feel what's going on and are really cool. There's a show that I did, or I went to somewhere, I don't even remember where. They had a 3D printed model of what the set was so that people could feel what the stage looked like. And that was so cool. And I loved that. And I want us to do more of that. In regards to communication, there should also always be options for both written and spoken communication. That includes the option to email and text rather than call, but also like in-person different options, as some people can only use one medium, or others may prefer one medium over another. And also like prepare yourself for different kinds of communication from patrons, be that sign language or an ASC device or anything else. Signs are also a huge part of communication. Not like sign language signs are also important part of communication, but I'm talking about like literal signs with words on them. If people cannot find your event or find different important pieces of it, that is an error on the organizer's part. It should be easy to find the entrance to the event. It should be easy to find the bathrooms, or if it's not easy to find the bathrooms, like at a lot of Broadway theaters, they tell you when you walk in where the bathrooms are, and elevators should be very easy to locate. Like people often presume that if you really need an elevator, you're going to ask where it is, but a lot of people could benefit from using elevators and are too afraid to ask, and therefore just suffer on the stairs for no reason, or they don't know that it exists because it's not labeled, and so they just assume that they have to suffer. Like Broadway theaters, again, a lot of them have elevators in there, and a lot of the elevators are really hard to find and not labeled, and so you wouldn't know unless you asked. So those should be more obvious. Making signs really giant is awesome, as is using arrows. I'm also a huge fan of having a giant map in front of where everything is going to be, or printing out tiny maps for people and having large print ones available, obviously. Having a lot of signage so it is super clear that you're going in the right direction is really, really crucial. Also make sure that those signs are in plain language and simple and clear fonts, and photos in addition to text can be very helpful, like having a little bathroom sign next to the sign for restrooms. Also, speaking of plain language, another thing I cannot recommend enough is making a visual story. This is a resource that shows, using plain language and images, what you can expect from an event. So like what the building looks like, where to park, where to walk in, what the inside is going to look like, where everything's going to be, when different things are going to happen, who you might see or meet there, like, oh, the ushers are going to be wearing this, so if you have a question you can go to somebody who's wearing, you know, this kind of outfit or has this lanyard on. The like sensory input of what the thing is going to be like, oh, it might be really loud here, it's going to be quiet here, that kind of stuff. What people might wear, what kind of behavior is typical, like, oh, this is a sit and listen quietly thing, or it's a mingling and small talk event, or it's an interactive situation. This should also include the menu and a list of accessibility options, as well as a like what to do if you have questions or need help kind of situation. There should always be an easy way to find somebody to ask for help in regards to accessibility, and also just like generally there should always be an easy way to ask for help in regards to anything at an event. And it's okay if you're not 100% on what the setup is going to look like beforehand, because it's going to be like put together the day of or whatever. That's totally fine if things are subject to change. You can say that in the visual story. Just having some information is more helpful than not having any information at all. And a feeling of transparency around it makes people feel safer and more willing to come to the event, because they're like, oh, you know, they said in the visual story that this is to be determined, but it is going to be somewhat structured like this. Okay, I have a general idea of what I can expect, so I can enjoy myself more. I also saw one place that I went to include what hours and days the museum is usually the quietest and least active in their visual story, which is really cool. I've never thought about that, but that was an incredible addition. I also personally love making visual stories before events because it makes me realize what things I totally forgot to plan and meant to do. So it helps me close a lot of gaps in planning that may have been a bad surprise in the final few days of organizing. So it's also a really helpful tool for me as somebody who's creating an event. This visual story should get emailed out to people at least a few days before the event, or even in the like thanks for purchasing your ticket response email if it's done ahead of time. There should also be a place where patrons can state what their access needs might be so you can plan ahead. I once ordered a ticket for an event, I think it was BroadwayCon last year, and it came along with an access survey to take beforehand that asked for the name on the ticket, a checklist for you to say which various needs you may benefit from, which I'll read in a second and also put on the screen, followed by a short answer. Are there any specifics you need to share regarding your selections above? And is there anything else we need to know in order to best support you during your time at this event? And the checklist options were: use a mobility aid, cannot stand for long periods of time, cannot go up and down stairs, benefit from ASL interpretation, benefit from captioning, hearing and or auditory processing issues, vision and or visual processing issues, other sensory sensitivities and or sensory processing issues, other needs related to neurodivergence, ADHD, autism, OCD, etc., other needs related to mental health conditions, anxiety, PTSD, etc. I have a severe allergy that may impact my safety. It was fantastic. I will say that neurodivergence includes mental health conditions, so it was weird that they split that up. I didn't love that. But other than that, this is really, really helpful, because even if that event, I don't know, ended up not being incredibly accessible to me, it was. But like if it had been, just seeing that they cared enough to include a tally of that information makes it feel more accessible to me regardless. Another part of this is watching what language that you use. I've seen events that have signs that are like for ADA guests or handicap bathroom or neurodiverse resources, when Americans with Disabilities Act guests doesn't make any sense. Handicap is an outdated term and the correct word there would be accessible, and a neurodiverse resource would just be a resource because everybody is neurodiverse. Neurodivergent is the word they're looking for. So seeing that language somewhere makes me think like, wow, I'm really glad that they're trying, that's really great, but clearly they're in way over their heads and don't know what they're doing, and I don't actually trust that I am going to be accommodated. In fact, I usually assume that I won't be accommodated, but then blamed when I call that out because they're trying, so therefore I'm ungrateful for not finding it to be accessible. So just be careful with what kind of language you are using, what kind of labels you're using when you put things together. It's a really easy thing to not mess up. Other mental disability access things include using content warnings where applicable, or giving a heads up when a specific thing might be loud or bright in comparison to other things. Like museums often will put warnings on the outside of exhibits. Warnings should also include scent, light, and volume warnings when applicable, but it is also good practice to try to avoid using scented things, flashing, moving, or black lights, and loud music and otherwise sound design wherever possible. If it's not necessary, don't have it. It needs to be purposeful as to why you're doing it. If you don't have a reason for it, don't do it. Just bad idea. Having designated quiet spaces and or sensory spaces, a sensory space usually means that it involves like sensory tools and whatnot that are clearly marked off and labeled, are also a really important tool, and many events have sensory bags with headphones, sunglasses, a map of the event, and STEM toys that can be borrowed and returned afterward. A big company organization that does this that you can partner with is called Culture City. They're really great. They put together these sensory bags and many events will partner with them. You can also just make your own. It's really easy. For my thesis, we made 50 bags for under $200. So it was super chill. I mean, we didn't have headphones and sunglasses. We just had STEM toys and a little like map of what was going on. And we did have a couple pairs of ear defenders actually that people could borrow, now that I think about it. But it was fairly cheap for putting all of those together. For events that have large lines or waiting times, some people are unable to wait in lines for long periods of time for various reasons, like somebody who can't stand for long periods of time, or needs to go to the bathroom frequently due to their disability, or gets severely overwhelmed waiting without knowing how long the wait is going to be, gets overwhelmed by the amount of noise around them while waiting, etc. And there are lots of different ways is to handle this. I know it's a big thing. This is a big issue at various conventions and whatnot. One option is to have a designated quiet area for patrons to wait in, or giving somebody the ability to put their companion or friend in line to wait for them while they are elsewhere, and then when they get to the front of the line, this friend can come back, or giving you a time to come back to the line based on the estimated wait time so that you can wait elsewhere and then come back at that designated time. I know that's how Disney works. It's not a perfect science. It's really difficult, really anything that you do, but for places where wait times can be several hours long, any sort of accommodation here is obviously ideal. The last disability accessibility thing that is really important is COVID safety. Also, if you start saying in the comments, the pandemic is over, it doesn't matter, COVID is still around and it's still dangerous and you should still be wearing a mask. Thank you. Having masked events can be very helpful. Offering masks at events can be very helpful. Specifying what thing is masked and what isn't. I know some off-Broadway shows have been doing specific mask-only nights still, which is so wonderful, because for immunocompromised people, we would like to not die. And we would like to feel safe when we go out in public. And COVID safety also includes offering, not just COVID safety, general disability accessibility also includes having virtual or remote options, like giving people the ability to buy a streaming ticket. That has been really helpful. I can go to more things now, even when I'm like too tired to leave. And it also doesn't have to be like a direct at the time of stream. It can be like you film the event and you upload it 3 hours later to the streaming link, whatever. That still makes it more accessible for lots of people to be able to attend, and you will be getting more ticket sales if you do a streaming option. Also, accessibility is more than just disability. It also includes other minority access. So, for example, anti-racist policies, really important. Having name tags with pronoun stickers or offering pronoun buttons so people don't get constantly misgendered is important. Having gender-neutral bathrooms, or at least having a sign saying that you accept gender diversity. I know that New York law requires gendered signage on multi-stall bathrooms, so it is hard to have fully non-gendered bathrooms, but at least having one of the like, we support gender diversity, please use whatever restroom feels comfortable to you. Also, here's where the single-use restrooms are signs are really great and really helpful and important. Accessibility also includes potential childcare options, having nursing rooms, having changing tables in men's restrooms, having larger changing tables available for disabled adults. It includes accessible ticketing, not just in price. Many events have scholarships or sliding scale tickets, but also in how to get those tickets, whether that's online or via an app or in person. Like, for example, a lot of the cheapest Broadway Rush tickets, you have to go in person at a specific hour of the morning to make sure that you're going to get them. I can't wake up that early unless, like, I mean, I can, like, it's fine, but it involves disrupting my sleep schedule and potentially putting myself at migraine risk. And so I have to pay more money to get Broadway tickets from a different Rush program that is more expensive, because I cannot afford to wake up that early to go get a cheaper ticket. That's frustrating. That's an accessibility issue as well. And also, like, having your online thing be logically structured is also important. That's also a part of accessibility. A lot of websites are just really badly designed. But most importantly, with all of this, train your staff to know what to expect and how to help with that. Going somewhere that says that they're accessible to service dogs, but then all of the staff who work there keep asking you weird questions about your dog and your health and keep trying to pet your dog is not actually accessible to service dogs. Staff members need to know where everything is, what access options are available, how to handle meltdowns, how to use alternative communication methods, how to handle a medical emergency, how to be around a service dog. All of these things are important. And this also includes emergency evacuation, because evacuating disabled people often looks very different from general evacuation. You need to plan for what to do if the elevator stops working and you have a wheelchair user patron who needs to get out, for example. The other thing that I would recommend is sending somebody through on a test run before you solidify everything. You know what resources you're putting together, so you know that what you're doing makes sense. But find somebody who has no idea what's going on and try all of it out and look through it before you send out the visual story or finalize your signage or whatever. Because they're going to point out the issues with it very, very quickly and give you the ability to fix them beforehand. In the same way that, like, in college, when I would write papers, I would send them to my friends in a completely different major to read, because if it didn't make sense to them, I had failed at my job. It's the same situation. They're your target audience. You need to cater to them so that they are able to enjoy whatever it is that you are putting together. But anyway, that is all that I have for you today. I know, again, this is pretty short, but I hope that it was somewhat helpful. Also, a specific creator that I really like, Sunny Drain Wise, who you may know as Lived Experience Educator on the social medias, has a template for a neurodivergent inclusion policy that may be a helpful resource, so I've linked that below for you if you want to check that out. I will also link my visual story that I made for my thesis, and my accessible education playlist, my accessible staging video as well, in case any of that is helpful. And yeah, let me know if there's anything that you've seen in accessible spaces or at accessible events that really meant a lot to you. I would love to add to this list and learn more about accessibility. I definitely have spots that I don't know as much about that I want to learn more about. And yeah, as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for learning. Remember, it's never too late to start over. Also, critical thinking is sexy. And I look forward to seeing you, my dear, in the next one.